Personally, I just can't wait to see where she ends up by the time the Owl House comes to its end.
I think I'll take you out myself. You can't hide forever. This is my empire now. You have to obey me!
Yeah, I kinda saw this coming. Before anything else is said in this video, I would like to, as I have before, clarify that nothing I say here is meant to excuse Kikimora's actions or attitude. She is, objectively speaking, a horrible person. She's petty, she's manipulative, she's violent, and she seems to have no qualms with throwing anyone under the bus in order to get to her ultimate end goal. I only want to use this video to examine in-canon evidence to explore why I think she ended up the way she did, and why she fascinated me to the point that she's still one of my favorite characters in the show. Don't worry, Ida's #1 now and forever. But as I said at the start, I did see this outcome for Kikimora happening. If you watched my previous video about how she behaved in Follies of the Coven Day Parade, you'll know that I mentioned I'd been working on a half-hour-long character essay about her that the premiere of Follies completely invalidated because of how stupid it would be to release it after so much speculation in it had already been proven or disproven. Rest in peace, hours and hours of work. But one thing that wasn't answered in Follies was whether or not she'd be redeemed, and at the time I was working on the original essay, I didn't think she would be.
What?
Not enough hints toward an actual decent side of her had been showcased to make a convincing argument that she would go through a redemption by the end of the show. But when Season 2B came around, it featured a couple of key developments that affected both the big picture we had of her character and how she might progress. Follies was an obvious one, showing that she actually had things going on outside of the Coven, with the other major event being, of course, King's Tide. After all this time she's been utterly loyal to Belos, enacting his every whim without question, and seeking to ensure all traitors of the Coven are rightfully punished, now, on the Day of Unity, she finally believes she's in a position to reach her true desire, a place as the Emperor's right hand. At last, she's rewarded for all her hard work and dedication, by being literally told to go die in a hole. Huh. The guy who's been shown to throw people away when he has no more use for them, threw her away when he had no more use for her. Who could have seen that coming? You missed the writing on the wall, Kiki. The leopards ate your face! Then something happened that made me feel vindicated as a fan of this character. After Kikimora tells King that the Collector is the only one who can stop Belos in the draining spell, he requests that she take him to them, and Kiki, seeing this as the perfect opportunity to get revenge on the Emperor for dropping her like a sack of patatas, is all too happy to do so. It was amazing. Kikimora was doing something to work in the protagonist's favor. Sure, she would have died with everyone else if she didn't, and it was largely out of spite, but I'm pretty sure spite provides her with 90% of the energy she uses to get up in the morning anyway. In any case, this was it. This was the first step on the road to something resembling redemption. I'd forgotten my prediction from the original draft and started pondering what she'd be like when we finally returned her to the Boiling Isles. Would she feel lost with no sense of what her life is without the Coven? Would she fall into a state of constant panic or depression? Could she potentially even be an ally when Belos came back and help fight him off to prove that she's her own demon now? I was more excited than ever to see her again. Her potential for positive change had never been higher. And then For the Future premiered. Or rather, I should say For the Future was leaked because there is no villain duo more iconic than Disney and iTunes. Several people were victims of unwanted spoiling because of the amount of folks who just couldn't resist throwing up pictures and plot details everywhere, and I ended up being one of them. Not just on Twitter though, someone left this comment I've since deleted on my last video. I thought I was a small enough creator that I wouldn't have to worry about getting spoiled, but I guess ruining fresh enjoyment of a show has no follower requirement. Look, I don't want to be too mean. I've blocked out their names so they don't feel called out immediately, and that's because I don't even really disagree with what they wrote, for reasons I'll get into once we go over everything that happened with her in the new episode. But not even warning about spoilers before typing everything out? Come on, man. Anyway, Kikimora in For the Future. Rather than be out and alone trying to figure things out for herself, she's allied with Basha in the student shelter that is New Hexside and disguised herself and her Abomatron as sisters Mickey and Roka. They've taken over the school and begun enforcing a rule that is clearly very unpopular with and unhealthy for the remaining students, with Mickey and Roka acting as President Basha's bodyguards and advisors. Well, advisor. Their rule keeps students locked in place by shooting down helpful ideas that would have to divert resources from the security that's been keeping any more students from being collected, as well as depriving them of all puzzle books so nobody has time to think about what an anagram is. However, after Kikimora reveals herself and captures our protagonists, we learn that she and Basha have no intention of stopping the Collector, forming a partnership that is apparently more equal than that which Kiki is used to in order to become the rulers of the next generation on the Boiling Isles, using fear to get people to fall in line, a lot like Belos, as Luz is keen to point out in a not undeserved roast. She tries to kill them all herself because she has long since cancelled her subscription to Chill the Hell Out Monthly, but Camila's misremembering of glyphs actually gives them a chance to escape. Kikimiki is in hot pursuit though, and the start of Luz's palisman beginning to hatch gives her just the direction needed to catch up with them. After being given the runaround and a bit of a smackdown, she resolves to start her own empire without the help of anyone from the school. In response, she is promptly ambushed by everyone from the school, including Basha, who was convinced by Amity to help them fight back so she could save her collected friends. Kiki breaks free and launches one final attack with a delusional cry of superiority, only for the intended targets to teleport safely away to the inside of the Titan's skull. So yeah, that's Kikimora in for the future. After her one act of defiance against the Emperor who used her and threw her away, she goes right back into her old habits of asserting whatever control and power she can get over people, attacking anyone she dislikes and clawing her way to the top as best she can. She's even dipped her toes into a new brand of reprehensible actions, since we see her bringing up the loss of Basha's Grudge-Bee team to manipulate her into reacting the way she wants her to. It's pretty horrible and fairly upsetting, since when I was spoiled about Kiki's new design as Mickey by this end credits shot, I was hoping it would be a moment of her genuinely comforting Basha. After the episode though, it's hard to read it as anything but Kiki finding an opportunity in a moment of vulnerability to guide Basha in the direction she wants of her. Naturally, this whole scheme ends with yet another humiliating failure to accomplish anything she set out to achieve. Things haven't changed for Kikimora at all, and where she once had the safety net of her status as a member of the Emperor's Coven to keep her afloat, now she has nothing. I think this was an easier pill for me to swallow than I expected because I had been spoiled on the fact that she was still awful, but it still feels like things could have ended differently for her. At least it did, until I realized that this was the only ending for her that made sense with where she was at. Looking back at the comment that was left on my Coven Day Parade video, they said she's probably just gone down this path out of spite or having lost all reason, what Hunter or Lilith could have become if they'd just broken down from the abuse they received under Belos, and I feel like that's a really good point. I do love me some parallels between the Coven trio, and this comment and my reflection on the episode itself made me remember something from my original discarded essay, a parallel I drew between the three of them that Kikimora diverged from. It's something that we'd seen in all redeemable antagonists in the show that, at the time of writing, Kikimora did not have, a meaningful connection outside the circle they were in. Everyone on a dark path had been tethered to the light by someone who could show them that the way they were doing things was wrong. Lilith had Ida, Amity had Luz, Bartholomew had Gus, and Hunter had Luz too, kind of. Nowadays, Hunter has the Emerald Entrails as well, Basha has Amity and her Grudge-Bee team, and even though their arc isn't complete yet and is set to take a turn for the worse, the Collector has King. Then you have Kikimora. The very first time we learn of her connection she has outside the Coven, it's in Follies at the Coven Day Parade, where she's going through a stressful call with her mother and is being pressured to leave her post and attend a family reunion. From the clear conflict she's suffering throughout the episode, it's pretty apparent that she does legitimately want to go see them, but knows that she's far from being in a comfortable position to abandon her Coven duties, even those regarding something as silly and celebratory as a parade. Of course, in the end, thanks to Terra Snapdragon's lies of a promotion, Kiki forgoes any desire to see her family, cutting off the one outside connection she has for the sake of a reward that ends up being little more than a backhanded death threat. How exactly does one end up making this kind of decision so easily, even if they end up with some regrets later due to circumstances? Well, first of all, Kikimora's mother seemed to have ridiculous standards even while on a phone call and threatened to banish her from their hometown if she didn't show up, so it's fair to say that her family wasn't great to begin with. A far cry from Lilith's strained but ultimately loving relationship with Ida and Hunter's sibling-like bickering with Luz, met with common ground in their interest in wild magic and uncertainty of their destinies. There really was no right choice for the hand gremlin to make in this scenario since neither environment strikes me as ideal, though seeing as how her decision ended up allowing her to live, I guess it was the right choice in that regard? The other reason she chose the Coven over her family is because, with such an estranged relationship and a promise of moving up in the Coven, it was the only choice her brain would ever allow her to make, which is entirely by design. Not her own design, but that of the asshat formerly known as Philip. While there are signs of the effects being part of the Emperor's Coven could have on someone's mental state sprinkled throughout the series, it's in Any Sport in a Storm that we're given the most verbally explicit proof of the tactics Belos uses to cull the weakest from the ranks and ensure the rest can be more easily bent to his will. Hunter, while trying to find potential Coven recruits, is all too eager to suggest tryouts for Willow's flyer derby team, which consists of things such as witches' duels, booby-trapped mazes, and being left at the top of a mountain to see who survives making it back down.
Classic.
Sure enough, we learn from Steve that these are the very trials that Emperor's Coven recruits are put through in their initiation. Anyone who makes it through these trials has already been pitted against their fellow witch and thrown into danger that some of their peers may not have even lived through. Even before they're officially part of the Coven, recruits are learning that if they want to accomplish anything, they have to be better and stronger than everyone around them. This intentionally crafted atmosphere stifles the chances of forming any meaningful bonds while in the Coven. It's hard to be friends with someone if you want to be better than them or else risk losing everything you worked for. Hunter also tells the Emerald Entrails that when they join, they'll be leaving their friends and family forever, cutting off all former connections as well. This complete isolation may not always be so complete in practice, but in theory, it is exactly what makes the Emperor's Coven such a perfect safeguard for Belos. With unlimited magic, no ordinary witch should be able to stand against the Coven, and without anyone less indoctrinated with whom they can join forces, the Coven shouldn't be able to stand against him. For someone who's constantly been asked to meet high standards even before joining, that lesson the recruits learn likely sunk in even faster and deeper. While we don't know for sure, it's not likely that the pressure Kikimora's mother put on her started after she joined the Emperor's Coven. Rather, like the aspirations projected onto Amity by her mother, it was probably what led Kiki to aim for such a position in the first place. In time, she would have earned the position of being the Emperor's personal assistant, and seeking prestige to earn the pride of her distant family would be supplanted by seeking prestige to earn the pride of her Emperor, and defeat her own pride. She still did have an emotional connection to her family, but once she heard she would earn a promotion if she didn't abandon the Coven Day parade, she made the only choice that made sense to her, making a sacrifice to be great, another lesson imparted by Belos as we learned from Lilith in Young Blood Old Souls. Kikimora is an awful person, there's no denying that. She's willfully taken part in public petrification, she's attacked and tried to kill teenagers on multiple occasions, she used a girl's shame and hurt to manipulate her into helping her seize power. She is very much not the hot kind of bad. What she is a perfect product of the intent behind the Emperor's Coven, a paranoid, power-hungry backstabber willing to isolate herself completely from any positive connections for the sake of greater glory. These ways have been so thoroughly ingrained into her psyche that even the betrayal of the witch she swore her life to isn't enough to make her question her behavior. After all, from what Hunter told the Emerald Entrails, that's just business as usual in the Coven, so much so that even people considered friends do it. So of course she falls back into the typical routine once everyone's favorite gamer baby makes everything flipped turned upside down. She is perfectly in control of the actions and choices she makes, yet they have been so thoroughly molded by her position in the system she and 2 whole generations were born into that she's no less a victim of the Emperor's manipulation of the entire Boiling Isles than most other residents we see. Maybe this is all reasoning the writers never once thought about. Maybe they just decided after the one episode of giving her some development that they'd just resort to her being cartoonishly evil from then on and thought nothing more of it. But I'd like to think that they had the same thought process behind putting her on the path she went on that I have. The idea of what she is being a logical result of the environment she was so thoroughly entrenched in, rather than how she was crafted by the writers for the sake of having a comic relief villain, has made her that much more interesting to me. I just wish more people felt the same way. The fact that the sun is bright is only slightly less observable than the fact that a lot of people in the Owl House fandom really do not like Kikimora. Even back in Season 1, there were those out there who were disdainful of her just because of her smug little turd attitude. Some of those I've seen who are most vocal about disliking her are also pretty big in the fandom, and I don't want to rag on them specifically. Like I've said before, people are free to dislike her, nothing wrong with opinions. I also happen to enjoy a lot of stuff these people put out, so I don't want it to feel like I'm disdainful of them for being so vocal about what they think about this character, especially given that she's a villain. It's totally fine to dislike antagonistic characters, this isn't Tumblr in the 2010s. But when you look at how she's treated in comparison to Belos, the main antagonist responsible for the system she was raised in, who a lot of people dislike as well, the attitude towards her seems ridiculously vitriolic. I hope it isn't a hot take to say that she isn't nearly the disgusting piece of work he is. Hard to beat being a genocidal, fratricidal, manipulative, abusive fascist. But when you search Kikimora's name on Twitter or Tumblr or what have you, you'll find the sentiment of telling her to die or fuck off or wishing she never came back a lot more than you will the same sentiment directed towards Belos by searching his name. I'll freely admit to recency bias being a potential factor, and his continued presence is a lot more important to driving the plot than Kiki's, but none of that cancels out what an absolute monster he is. He killed his brother. He's an instigator of systemic oppression. He's had literal centuries to realize that witches and demons are no more inherently evil than mankind and shrug off the biases his upbringing left him with, the very ones that his brother had no trouble discarding when he met Evelyn. But he didn't. He would have seen every witch who believed in him, even one who shared his brother's image, perish on the Day of Unity while he just walks back home to the human realm. And yet, it seems like people are keen to publicly express that they want the screwy little finger goblin to suffer so much more than they do the murderously prejudiced tyrant. Even the show itself feels like it's on their side sometimes. Where people who liked her were vindicated by her last act in King's Tide, the much more numerous people who disliked her were vindicated by every moment of her screen time in For the Future, because they didn't get to experience that enough already.
Hole in one!
Look, this isn't me being upset that a villain has continued to be a villain, even though I think it could have been neat if she had a change of heart. And it isn't me being mad at people for disliking a character I like. I'm just worried about how people react to others expressing their enjoyment of Kikimora. A worry I have pretty tangible proof is well-founded. When I was working on my unreleased first video about Kiki, I drew some art of her without that collar on her uniform to give an estimate as to what her full face might have looked like. I was pretty proud of this picture. It's one of the few pictures I've ever drawn for myself and completed in its entirety in one sitting. And one of a slightly greater number of pictures I've ever drawn for myself and completed, period. I posted it up on my Twitter where it's been seen, and I shared it in a now deleted Owl House Discord I was a part of. Knowing that people in the fandom didn't like Kikimora and would probably express this within their responses, I then left a reply to the piece that someone had posted before in order to foster an atmosphere of positivity in hopes that people would pick up on this and leave some kind of input more focused on the art I made rather than the subject matter. Turns out I wasted that effort, as this was the only comment posted afterward that seemed like it could have been a response to my picture. No positivity about how I did, no I hate her but this looks cool as the one Twitter reply I got said, just abject disdain. After a quick meme response to show my disagreement, I further vocalized how wildly unhelpful this sort of attitude is for everyone involved and how it discourages people from putting themselves out there. No further responses were given. The channel just continued with people posting theirs or other people's artwork. I suppose I'm lucky that the only thing I personally took from this interaction was that the person who replied may have just been a kid who didn't know how to properly act in creative spaces on the internet. The lesson someone younger than me might have taken is, when I express my genuine enjoyment of this character, people will not react with interest. They will only react with disgust. Maybe I shouldn't do that again. That sort of lesson being imparted onto people on the internet, especially kids who are impressionable to things like that, really sucks. When positively channeled, passion is a genuinely beautiful thing. It's what brought us so much music we love listening to, it's what brought us that amazing fan art we saw the other day, it's what brought us that kids' TV show that we hold so dear to our hearts. And when you trample all over that passion with negativity, without a single kind word offered at no cost to yourself, you risk ruining any desire that person may have of expressing that passion again. Even now I'm worried about how people will react to this video, how some people may say I'm just making excuses for Kikimora being the way she is, even though the very first thing I said was that that's not what I'm trying to do. I worry not simply for how I will be affected by such words, but for how the people who react in such ways will react towards others who want to show how much they like her too. Maybe that's why this particular video is so important for me to complete. We still have one 45-minute special before the Owl House as we know it comes to an end. It's always possible that Kikimora is going to have one final moment of redemption potential in Watching and Dreaming, probably whenever Bellows makes whatever POS move he's planning, but I'm not going to bet on that horse. Any appearance she makes is probably just going to be a small cameo showing how she was beaten by the Hexside students or tried to run away and was punted off a cliff or something. Post by character designer Matthew Cousin, showing design sheets from For the Future, elaborated that they actually thought about the idea of Kikimora being a good leader at New Hexside, which would have been nice to see, but makes it pretty clear to me that the chance the narrative would have taken for her to turn things around has come and passed. Wherever Kikimora ends up is not going to be very different from where she is now. And I'm okay with that. I really like the idea of the person who Kikimora could have been, but I still thoroughly enjoy the character that she is. She's annoying, she's petty, and she's bloodthirsty, but she makes for such a fun little rat to put under a microscope, as well as providing plenty of great animation and humorous moments, usually at her own expense. In spite of what little value others may see in her, I hope other people who like her can continue to do so and express themselves as I have. I was able to keep working on my initial Kiki video until Follies came out, I was able to put the video on that episode together, and now, when vitriol towards her seems higher than ever, I'm putting this video out there to express my sustained thoughts on her. Kikimora is, against all odds, one of my favorite characters in the Owl House. And hopefully along with everyone else who likes her, no amount of hatred the fandom may hold for her is ever going to make me stop expressing that.